The day began with a soft quiet that felt strange from the very first moment. The sun was rising above the studio lot, but something in the air felt heavier than usual. It was the kind of morning where a person could sense that something important was about to happen even before anything had actually begun. The crew moved around with their usual energy, but there was a silent tension underneath their voices. People whispered things they could not explain. And in the middle of all this quiet confusion stood Sandra Bullock, trying her best to look calm even though her eyes told a different story. From the second Keanu Reeves walked onto the set, he noticed something was different about her. Sandra always carried a warm smile that made everyone feel safe, but today it was not the same. Her smile felt thin, almost as if she had borrowed it from a memory. She greeted the crew politely and tried to act normal, yet Keanu sensed the slight tremble in her voice. He knew her well enough to understand that she was hiding something. He did not know what it was, but he could feel it deep in his chest. Something small, something quiet, something that she did not want anyone to see. The director called everyone to prepare for the first scene of the day. Sandra took her position near a prop table, and Keanu stood opposite her, waiting for the cameras to roll. The room grew still. Yet even before the scene began, Keanu noticed the way Sandra's hands held the script too tightly. He noticed the way her eyes kept drifting away, as if she was trying to push back a thought she did not want to face. He watched her breathe in slowly, as if she needed courage just to stand there. When the scene began, everything seemed fine at first. Sandra delivered her lines with perfect timing, but halfway through she made a small mistake. It was not a big one. Anyone could have made it. But for some reason the crew laughed gently, thinking it was lighthearted. That small laugh hit Sandra harder than anyone expected. Her shoulders stiffened. Her eyes lowered. She took a breath that sounded too shallow. Keanu watched her carefully. He knew exactly what that reaction meant. He remembered something small, something she had told him years ago during a quiet night shoot on a different film. She had shared a tiny detail about herself that most people would forget. She mentioned that when she feels nervous, she fears becoming the center of attention, because when she was young, a group of people once laughed at her mistake during a theater performance. She said it in a soft voice, almost embarrassed, as if the memory still hurt her even after all this time. She never talked about it again. But Keanu remembered. He remembered every word. The moment he saw her reaction today, he knew that old fear had returned. The laugh might have been innocent from the crew, but for Sandra it was like stepping back into her past. Keanu could not let that happen. Without calling attention to himself, he shifted his position, stepped slightly in front of her, and asked the director if he could try a different angle for the scene. He spoke with calm confidence. The director agreed immediately, trusting his instinct. Keanu moved in a way that redirected focus away from Sandra, giving her space to breathe. He made it look natural, as if it was a creative choice for the film. Nobody saw what he was really doing. Nobody understood why he did it, but Sandra understood. She looked at him with grateful eyes, but she still did not speak. Another take began. The tension remained in the room like a shadow. Sandra tried her best to stay composed, but everyone could feel the atmosphere shift. Even small noises felt louder. Every movement seemed heavier. Keanu could sense the pressure building inside her like a quiet storm. He worried that if something did not change now, she might break under it. She had always been strong, but even strong people have moments where old pain comes back and tries to take over. Halfway through the take, Keanu noticed something else. Sandra's hand, the one holding a small metal prop, was shaking slightly. It was a tremor so tiny that most people would never see it, but to him it felt like a warning sign. He stepped closer to her in the scene, not breaking character, guiding the moment with a gentle presence. He lowered his voice in a calm tone that only she could hear and said the next line slowly, giving her a small anchor in the middle of the scene. She steadied herself. Her breathing shifted. Her eyes softened as if she felt safe again. But the moment the director called cut, Sandra stepped back and looked down at the floor. She did not say a word. She was fighting something inside her that she did not want anyone to witness. Keanu watched her walk away to a quiet corner. She pressed her fingers to her forehead. She tried to act like she was simply tired, but he knew it was more than that. He could feel it. The years they had worked together had built a silent understanding between them. They did not always need words. Keanu approached her carefully, giving her space but making sure she knew he was there. She forced a small smile and said she was fine, but he knew it was not true. Before he could say anything else, the director called him to review the footage. Keanu nodded but kept an eye on her as he walked away. The crew gathered around the monitors. People discussed lighting and movement. Everything looked normal to them. But Keanu could not focus fully because his mind kept drifting to Sandra standing alone in the corner. He felt a pull inside him, a need to help her even though he was not sure how. He kept remembering that small conversation from years ago, the one she probably forgot, but he never did. It stayed with him because it mattered. He always believed that the small things reveal a person more deeply than the big ones. After the review, Keanu stepped away from the group and walked out of the studio for a moment. No one noticed. He needed to think. He needed to figure out what would help her feel safe again. As he stood outside under the soft morning light, he remembered something else. Another small detail from that same old night shoot. She had once mentioned an object she used to carry when she felt nervous, something she lost long ago but never replaced. The memory came back slowly but clearly, like a quiet light appearing in a dark room. An idea formed in his mind, something simple, something kind, something that could change the entire mood of the day if he did it right. Took a deep breath, then without telling anyone he walked out of the lot toward a small side workshop he had noticed earlier. He knew exactly what he needed to do, and he knew he had to do it now before the moment passed. Inside the studio, Sandra looked around and realized he was gone. Her heart tightened. She wondered if she had made the day difficult or if he had left because of her mistake. The worry grew inside her fast. The entire crew sensed her confusion, but nobody understood the reason behind it. The suspense slowly tightened around the set. Nobody knew where Keanu went. Nobody knew why the day felt different. Nobody knew that a decades-old memory had just awakened something important inside him. And Sandra had no idea that Keanu was about to change the entire day with one small act of kindness. A moment that would make her smile in a way she had not smiled in years. This was only the beginning. Inside the studio, the air felt heavier with every passing minute. The crew tried to continue preparing for the next scene, but their movements were slower than usual. Nobody wanted to say it out loud, yet everyone sensed something was wrong. Sandra stood near the corner of the set, gently rubbing her hands together while trying to pretend she was fine. She kept glancing at the door that Keanu had walked through minutes ago. Each time she looked, her worry grew stronger. She did not understand why he left so suddenly. She did not know if she caused it or if something else was happening. The unknown created a pressure in her chest that was hard to ignore. She tried to calm her thoughts by focusing on her script, but the words on the page felt blurry. Her mind kept replaying the moment when the crew laughed. Even though the laugh was small and innocent, it awakened an old memory she wished she had forgotten. She remembered standing on a stage as a young girl, making a simple mistake, and hearing a room full of people laugh. The sound had stayed with her for years. She had worked hard to bury it, to grow stronger, to learn confidence. But sometimes memories that hide in the shadows find a way to return when life becomes quiet. Today was one of those days. As the minutes passed, she tried to remind herself that she was not that young girl anymore. But emotions do not always listen to logic. She took a deep breath and tried to steady her heartbeat, yet a small part of her still feared she had disappointed the people around her. Sandra always expected control from herself. She always wanted to stay composed. She did not like anyone seeing her struggle, so she forced another practiced smile even though it felt weak. The director walked over to her and asked if she needed a short break. Sandra shook her head and said she was ready to continue, but the director hesitated. He could see that her calm face did not match the tension in her eyes. He wanted to ask her more, but he also respected her privacy. So he simply nodded and told her they would start once Keanu returned. Those words sent another uneasy feeling through her. She looked again toward the door, wondering why he still was not back. Keanu was never careless with time. He was never the type to leave the set without explanation. Her thoughts began to twist into worry. She wondered if he had gone to fix something for the film or if something unexpected had happened. Part of her feared he had left because she made the scene difficult. She felt a heaviness settle in her stomach as she remembered the slight shake in her hand during the scene. She knew he had noticed it. She could tell by the soft glance he gave her. What she did not know was that Keanu had left for a reason that had nothing to do with frustration or disappointment. He was walking with purposeful steps through the back area of the studio lot, heading to a small workshop that handled custom props and small creative items. He remembered the exact object Sandra once told him about years ago. Something she carried back when she was trying to build confidence at the start of her career. Something tiny and simple, yet full of emotional value for her. He pushed open the door to the workshop, surprising the technician who sat behind a cluttered table. The room smelled like fresh paint and warm metal. Keanu explained calmly what he needed. The technician listened with raised eyebrows because the request was unusual and very specific. But Keanu's voice was steady and his expression serious. He described the shape, the size, and the old memory connected to it. The technician nodded slowly and agreed to make it, though he warned that it might take some time. Keanu simply replied that he would wait. He did not care how long it took. What mattered was the meaning behind it. Back inside the studio, Sandra continued to stand quietly, trying to hide her worry from the crew. She did not want anyone to feel concerned. She never liked being the center of attention unless she was performing. She took a sip of water and tried to breathe evenly, but the silence around her felt too thick. She wished she could understand what was happening. She wished she knew where Keanu was and whether he was all right. The assistant director approached her gently and asked if she wanted to sit down. Sandra smiled again and said she was perfectly fine, but her voice trembled just a little. She hoped nobody heard it. She turned away slightly so she could hide her expression. She hated feeling exposed. She hated feeling vulnerable in front of people who were simply doing their jobs. Time kept passing and the tension grew. Crew members exchanged quiet looks but did not speak. They respected both Keanu and Sandra deeply, and everyone could sense that something personal was unfolding, even if they did not understand what it was. After nearly a half hour, the door finally opened and Keanu walked back inside. The moment Sandra saw him, her heartbeat shifted. She felt relief and confusion rise inside her at the same time. He carried something small in his hand, wrapped in soft cloth, but he kept it protected as he walked. She watched him silently as he approached the director first and asked for a few minutes before restarting the scene. The director agreed without question because he knew Keanu always had a thoughtful reason. Sandra stood frozen as Keanu turned to her. She tried to read his expression, but it was calm and steady, the same warm calmness he always carried whenever he wanted to make someone feel safe. He did not speak right away. He waited until they were standing a little away from the others. She felt her breath catch in her throat. Keanu looked at her gently and said that he noticed she seemed a little off today. He spoke in a soft tone, the kind that does not invade but invites. Sandra felt her eyes warm slightly. She opened her mouth to explain, but he lifted his hand lightly to show her the small object he brought. She stared at it without understanding. He told her that he remembered something she once shared with him a long time ago, something she thought he forgot. He handed her the cloth and waited while she unfolded it. Her hands trembled a little, not from fear this time, but from anticipation. Inside the cloth lay a small handcrafted item, shaped exactly like the one she used to carry years ago when she needed comfort. The moment she saw it, her breath stopped. Her mind spun back to a younger version of herself holding that object before stepping onto a stage or into an audition room. She had lost the original many years ago, and she never thought about it again. Or at least she tried not to. Seeing it now felt like opening a door she had kept locked for a long time. Her eyes lifted slowly toward Keanu. She felt something overwhelming rise inside her. She wanted to speak, but no words came. Keanu simply smiled in a tender, quiet way that made her feel understood. He told her that sometimes small memories carry big meaning, and he remembered because it mattered to her once. And he believed it still mattered today. A silence formed between them. Not a heavy silence, a soft one, a silence that held trust. Sandra felt her chest loosen as if someone had gently lifted a weight off her. She did not know whether to cry or laugh. She felt both emotions battling inside her. She clutched the small object gently and realized how much thought he had put into finding it. She realized he must have left the set just for her. He did all of this quietly without telling anyone, without expecting anything in return. And in that moment, something inside her began to shift. Something that had been tight for years began to open. But what neither of them knew yet was that this small moment was only the beginning. There was something else hidden inside this day, something that would soon come to the surface, something neither of them expected, something that would change the rest of the shoot and reveal emotions neither had spoken about before. The real twist was still waiting to arrive. The studio grew quiet again as Sandra held the small object in her hands. It rested in her palm like a memory she never thought she would touch again. The soft shape of it made her feel something warm inside, something she had not felt in a very long time. It was strange how something so small could reach so deep. She kept her eyes lowered for a moment because she needed a breath before she could face the flood of emotions rising in her chest. Keanu stood in front of her, watching her with steady calm. He did not rush her. He knew exactly how powerful the moment was, and he respected her silence. He always had a way of giving people space without making them feel alone. Sandra breathed in slowly, letting the air settle inside her as she tried to keep herself steady. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes were softer but heavier, as if holding tears that wanted to fall but were waiting for permission. She whispered that she could not believe he remembered. Her voice was small yet full of weight. Keanu answered gently that important things stay in the heart even when they seem forgotten. He said it in such a simple way that Sandra felt her chest tighten. The crew watched them from a distance, confused but respectful. They did not know what was happening, but they could see the emotional shift. Something real was unfolding right there, something that did not belong to the film but belonged deeply to the two people standing in that quiet corner. The director walked over slowly and asked if they were ready to continue. Sandra nodded, but Keanu spoke softly and asked for a few more minutes. The director agreed without question. He trusted Keanu's judgment, and he could tell that something meaningful was taking place. After the director stepped away, Keanu turned back to Sandra and asked if she wanted to sit. She hesitated, then nodded. He guided her toward a small bench near one of the props. Sandra sat down holding the object tightly, afraid it might slip away like the original one once did. She stared at it with a faraway expression, lost somewhere between past and present. Keanu sat beside her but left a respectful space between them, giving her room to breathe. He waited patiently until she was ready to speak. After a long moment, she finally explained that she had carried the original object during one of the hardest periods of her life. She shared how she used to grip it before auditions and before big meetings because it reminded her that she was trying her best even when fear made her heart tremble. She told him she lost it years ago and felt foolish for caring so much about something so tiny. She laughed quietly, but there was a sadness in her laugh. Keanu listened with full attention. When she finished, he told her gently that caring about something small is not foolish. He said that sometimes small things help people hold on to themselves. His voice held so much sincerity that Sandra felt the warmth reach her heartbeat. Then something unexpected happened. Sandra lowered her head and a tear quietly fell onto her hand. She did not want it to happen. She tried to wipe it quickly, but Keanu gently reached out and placed his hand over hers. He did not squeeze. He did not pull. He simply rested his hand softly so she knew she was not alone. She felt a rush of emotion, but this time it did not feel overwhelming. It felt safe. She let out a slow breath she had been holding for too long. Before she could speak again, a sudden sound echoed through the studio. It was the loud crash of metal hitting the floor. Both she and Keanu turned quickly. The crew rushed toward the sound, worried that someone had dropped a heavy piece of equipment. Sandra stood up fast, still holding the object. Keanu moved a step in front of her instinctively, protecting her in a quiet, natural way he did without thinking. The crew gathered around the source of the noise. One of the lighting stands had collapsed unexpectedly. It missed a crew member by only a few inches. Everyone froze for a moment, shaken by how close it had come to causing real harm. The director raised his voice slightly, telling everyone to check the equipment again for safety. Tension rippled across the studio. Sandra felt her heart jump at the sudden noise. Old memories mixed with new fear for whoever almost got injured. She exhaled slowly, trying to calm herself. Keanu noticed her expression and touched her shoulder gently. She looked at him and nodded, trying her best to stay composed. The noise had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. They returned to the bench for a moment so the crew could finish inspecting everything. Sandra placed the object gently on her lap and looked at Keanu with gratitude. She told him that she did not know how he always managed to appear in the right moment, like he could sense things before she said them. Keanu smiled softly and said that sometimes people who care notice things others do not. There was something in his eyes as he spoke that made Sandra pause. It was a softness mixed with something deeper, something unspoken. She felt it but did not fully understand it. A quiet question formed in her mind, but she was too afraid to ask it. She did not want to make assumptions. She did not want to misunderstand him. So she stayed silent even though part of her wanted to know what he was truly feeling. The crew called out that everything was safe again. The director signaled that they should prepare for the next take. Keanu and Sandra stood up slowly. Sandra held the object with care, slipping it into the small pocket of her jacket so it would stay close to her. Keanu watched her gently, as if making sure she felt steady enough to return to the scene. As they walked back toward their marks, something unusual happened. Sandra felt a calm she had not felt since the day started. Her shoulders relaxed. Her steps became lighter. Her breathing eased. She realized that Keanu's small act of kindness had changed something deep inside her. It was not just the object he brought. It was the message behind it. It was the thought that he remembered that he cared enough to act on that memory. But as they prepared to continue filming, Sandra noticed something else in Keanu's expression. He looked calm, but there was a small tension in his eyes, something he was holding back. She tried to read him, but she could not understand it. She wondered if something was bothering him. She wondered if there was something he was not telling her. What she did not know was that Keanu was keeping another secret. Not a bad one, not something dangerous, but something he had been carrying quiet inside himself for years, something connected to her, something he never said out loud because he believed timing mattered more than courage. The small object he gave her had brought back his own memories too, memories he had kept locked away, memories that were slowly waking up now. As the director called for action, Sandra and Keanu looked at each other for a brief second. In that moment, something passed between them, something unspoken, something real. The story of the day was shifting. The small memory was only the beginning. Whatever was coming next would reach deeper than either of them expected. The moment the director called action, the room shifted back into work mode, but something deeper was stirring beneath the surface. Sandra stepped into the scene with a quiet strength she had not felt earlier. The small object in her jacket pocket rested close to her heart, giving her a sense of comfort she could not fully explain. It felt like a missing piece of herself had been returned. Her breathing steadied, her focus sharpened. Yet at the same time, she sensed a quiet tension coming from Keanu, something soft but noticeable. They began the scene, speaking their lines with the natural chemistry they had always shared. Their timing matched perfectly, their expressions carried real emotion, and even the crew whispered about how beautifully the moment was unfolding. But Sandra kept catching brief flickers in Keanu's eyes. He delivered his lines flawlessly, yet something behind his calm expression felt unreadable. It made her heart beat a little faster each time their eyes met. As the scene reached its emotional peak, they moved closer to each other just as the script required. Sandra felt something shift again inside her. It was like the air between them had become thicker, filled with something neither one of them could name. Keanu held her gaze with a softness that felt almost vulnerable. She felt her heartbeat rise. She did not know if it was the scene or something real mixing into the performance. Before she could understand her own feelings, the director called cut. The moment broke, but the emotion did not fade. Sandra stepped back slowly, trying to steady her breathing. Keanu looked away for a moment as if he needed to hide something in his eyes. The director praised them for their performance, calling it one of the most natural takes of the day. The crew nodded in agreement, impressed by how much emotion the scene carried. But Sandra barely heard them. She was too focused on the strange change she felt from Keanu. She walked toward a table to take a sip of water, hoping it would calm her thoughts. Keanu followed her with steady steps, but his expression held a quiet seriousness she had not seen earlier. When they stood alone near a corner of the set, he asked gently if she was feeling better now. She nodded, though her voice shook slightly when she said she was fine. Keanu watched her carefully. He could see something in her eyes that she did not know how to express. He moved a little closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. He told her that she had done an amazing job in the scene and that she seemed stronger now. Sandra gave a small smile, grateful for his words. They always felt sincere when they came from him. But then she noticed the same tension again. She tilted her head slightly and asked him if he was all right. Keanu paused for a moment. He looked away as if searching for the right words. That alone made Sandra's heart pick up speed. He never hesitated like this. Something inside him was shifting, and she could feel it. Before he could answer, a crew member called Keanu to check a technical detail for the next scene. He nodded and stepped away, but Sandra kept watching him. Something about the way he walked felt different, like he was carrying a weight he did not want to show. She returned to her chair, but her mind would not settle. The small object in her jacket felt warm against her chest, reminding her of his kindness, yet there was something else building inside her. Something that made her wonder if he was struggling with something too. She thought about the way he stepped in earlier to protect her from embarrassment, the way he left the set to get her the object, the way he watched her with such care. It was more than simple kindness. It felt personal. The next scene required them to rehearse a moment together. Sandra approached Keanu slowly as he finished talking with the lighting team. When he saw her, he offered a soft smile, but there was something tight in the corners of his eyes. She asked again if he was sure he was fine. This time he let out a slow breath before answering. He told her he was thinking about something, but assured her it had nothing to do with her. He tried to sound calm, but Sandra felt the truth lying under his voice. Something was bothering him, something he was not ready to explain. They walked to the center of the set to rehearse the timing for the scene. The scene required them to stand close while the camera circled them slowly. The room grew quiet as the crew adjusted the lights. Sandra felt her heart beat a little faster when Keanu stepped closer. The silence between them felt different now, thicker, heavier. She could almost feel the unspoken thoughts in the air. As the camera operator tested the movement, Keanu leaned in just slightly to match the script's position. Sandra looked into his eyes, and for a moment he did not look away. There was something in his gaze that made her chest warm, something deep, something she could not escape even if she tried. The world around them felt blurred for a second. It was just the two of them standing there, breathing in the same quiet air. But then Keanu blinked and stepped back half a step as if he needed distance. Sandra felt a strange ache inside her, though she could not explain why. She told herself it was the emotional tension of the day. She told herself she was just tired, but deep down she knew it was something more. The director called for another short break before filming the next take, giving them time to reset. Sandra walked toward the dressing area to touch up her makeup, but halfway there she stopped. A sudden realization hit her. She understood something about Keanu's behavior that she had not seen before. The kindness he showed her was not casual. The memory he honored was not simple. The way he looked at her during the scene carried something warmer than friendship. She froze for a moment, unable to move. Her breath caught in her throat as she whispered to herself that maybe he had felt something for a long time, something he never said, something he tried to hide behind calm smiles and gentle silence. But before she could fully process the thought, the studio lights suddenly flickered. A slight electrical sound filled the air and the crew looked up in confusion. The flicker lasted only a second, but it was enough to send a wave of unease across the room. Sandra turned toward the set. Keanu was already watching her, his eyes filled with concern. The flicker stopped and the lights returned to normal, but the sudden shift tightened the atmosphere again. Sandra felt her heartbeat quicken. Keanu walked toward her slowly. He asked if she was okay. She nodded, but her voice felt small. Something about the day kept building more tension. Something invisible was rising between them, pushing emotions toward the surface. Keanu looked like he wanted to say something important, but before he could speak, another call came from the director. They needed both of them back on set immediately. Sandra glanced at Keanu with a mix of confusion and hope. The air between them felt like a question waiting to be answered, a question neither of them had the courage to ask yet. And the day was far from over. There was still a quiet truth waiting in the shadows, a truth that would soon reveal itself in a way neither of them expected. The small act of kindness was only the beginning. The real reveal was still coming, waiting for the perfect moment to appear. The moment they were called back to the set, Sandra felt a strange pull inside her chest. It was a feeling she did not know how to name, a mix of worry and curiosity, and something warmer that she was afraid to acknowledge. Keanu walked beside her with quiet steps, his expression calm on the outside, but carrying a weight she could sense beneath the surface. They both moved to their marks as the crew prepared for the next emotional scene. The script required closeness, vulnerability, and quiet tension. But the unspoken moments between them had already made the scene feel more real than anything written on paper. The director gave them a brief explanation of the angle they would be shooting. The camera would move slowly around them while they spoke their lines, focusing on their expressions. Sandra nodded, but her heart was beating faster than usual. She glanced at Keanu and saw that his eyes were already on her. It sent a shiver down her spine, not of fear, but of something deeper, something that made the moment feel even heavier. The scene began. The room fell quiet except for the soft hum of the camera. Keanu delivered his lines with a low voice filled with emotion. Sandra responded with equal intensity, their chemistry flowing naturally. But somewhere in the middle of the scene, Keanu's eyes softened in a way that was not part of the script. It was small, barely noticeable to anyone else, but to Sandra it felt huge. It felt personal. It felt like a door opening somewhere inside her heart. She almost forgot her next line because the emotion in his eyes caught her completely off guard. She steadied herself and continued, but her voice had changed. It sounded real, vulnerable, honest. The camera captured every detail. The intensity between them grew so strong that even the director did not call cut when the scene technically ended. Instead, he let the camera keep rolling for a few extra seconds because something magical was happening. Those few seconds felt like minutes. Sandra and Keanu stood silently, looking at each other, neither able to break the moment. The crew watched in silence, sensing something powerful unfolding. It was only when Sandra blinked that the director finally whispered cut. The moment shattered gently like glass. Keanu stepped back slowly. Sandra felt heat rise to her cheeks. She turned away quickly, trying to hide the rush of emotion that had risen so suddenly. The director praised them again, saying the scene looked perfect. But Sandra barely heard his words. All she could think about was the look in Keanu's eyes, a look that felt too deep to ignore. She walked toward her seat, needing a moment to breathe. She placed her hands on the sides of her chair and inhaled slowly, trying to steady herself. But the more she tried to calm her heart, the faster it beat. She was confused, she was curious, she was afraid of misreading everything. She had known Keanu for years. He had always been kind, always gentle, always respectful, but today felt different. The way he remembered the small object, the way he protected her earlier, the way he looked at her during the scene. Something inside her whispered that maybe he had been holding these feelings for longer than she realized. And yet she questioned herself. Maybe she was imagining it. Maybe the emotional day was making her see things that were not real. She shook her head gently, trying to focus, but her mind refused to settle. While she sat in her thoughts, Keanu walked to the far side of the set, pretending to check something with the crew. But he was not listening to anyone. His mind was spinning too. He had revealed more than he intended in that last scene. He could feel it. He had spent years keeping certain feelings locked away, afraid that speaking them might change everything between them. He valued her too much to risk hurting her or making her uncomfortable. But today, something inside him was shifting. Something he tried to keep quiet was finally waking up. He touched the edge of a prop lightly, grounding himself. He thought about the moment he saw her cry earlier. He thought about the way she held the small object. He thought about the strength she showed even when she was hurting. And suddenly he felt a tightness in his chest, the kind that appears when a truth becomes too heavy to hide. He wondered if he should tell her something he had kept to himself for years. Before he could think further, the director announced that they would be filming one final emotional scene before lunch. The entire crew moved quickly to reset the lights. Sandra stood up slowly, still trying to gather herself. She saw Keanu from across the room. He was staring down at the floor with a thoughtful expression, as if fighting with himself. She approached him carefully. Her heart beat loudly in her ears. When she stood in front of him, he lifted his head. They stared at each other for a long moment. Sandra finally spoke in a soft voice. She told him that he seemed distant in a different way now. She asked gently if something was wrong or if she had done something to upset him. Keanu's eyes softened. He shook his head and told her she had done nothing wrong. He said it with such sincerity that Sandra felt her chest ease. But the tension in his eyes remained. She asked again if he was sure he was all right. He hesitated. He looked away for a moment. Sandra felt her stomach twist. She waited quietly, giving him space to answer. Finally, Keanu spoke. He told her that today had brought back memories for him too, not just hers, not just small things, but memories he had kept silent, memories he never thought he would have the courage to speak about. His voice shook slightly as he said it. Sandra took a small step closer, her heart beating faster. She asked him what memories he meant. But before he could answer, the assistant director rushed over and called them urgently back to set. The timing could not have been worse. Keanu closed his eyes briefly in frustration. Sandra felt a wave of disappointment wash over her. She wanted to know. She needed to know. Something important was hanging in the air between them, waiting to be revealed. They walked toward the set again, both filled with unspoken emotion. The next scene required them to stand close together with the camera focusing on their faces. As they positioned themselves, Sandra felt Keanu's breath near her, and the closeness made her heart beat unevenly. He looked at her again with that same quiet intensity. She could feel the words he wanted to say trapped somewhere behind his eyes. The director prepared to roll the camera. The studio grew silent. The tension between Sandra and Keanu was so thick that even the crew seemed to hold their breath. But just as the director raised his hand to begin the take, the lights flickered again, this time much longer than before. The room darkened for a moment and then brightened sharply, surprising everyone. A hush fell over the studio. It was not fear this time. It was the feeling that something meaningful, something emotional, something life-changing was about to happen. The director checked the equipment, the crew whispered nervously, and Keanu stepped slightly closer to Sandra, as if to shield her again. She looked up at him with wide eyes. He looked down at her with a truth he could no longer hide. The day was reaching its turning point. A reveal was close. A truth was about to surface. A small memory had already changed the direction of the day, but what was coming next would change far more than that. The room stayed still for a long moment after the lights flickered. It felt as if the entire studio was holding its breath. Sandra looked around, confused and slightly uneasy, but Keanu's presence beside her kept her steady. His calmness reached her like a quiet anchor, grounding her even as the tension thickened around them. The director asked everyone to wait while the crew examined the circuits. People moved quickly yet carefully, creating a strange mix of noise and silence. But despite all the activity, Sandra's mind was only focused on one thing. Keanu, the way he looked at her. The way his voice trembled earlier. The way he said memories had come back for him too. Those words kept echoing inside her, refusing to fade. She wanted to ask him again, but the timing never seemed right. Something always interrupted. A call from the crew. A technical problem. A scene reset. But the biggest interruption of all was the emotion growing between them, something too strong to ignore, yet too delicate to rush. Keanu stepped closer to her to make sure she was all right. His gaze held a gentle seriousness that made her feel warm inside. She nodded softly, but her heart beat fast. She could not pretend anymore. She wanted answers. She wanted the truth he almost shared before they were called back. The crew finished inspecting the lights and announced that everything was stable again. The director prepared for one final take before lunch. It was a quiet, emotional scene, simple on paper, but with the weight of the entire day resting on their shoulders, it felt bigger than any script could describe. Sandra and Keanu walked back to their marks. As they faced each other, something deep settled between them. It was not fear. It was not confusion. It was a feeling that had grown slowly through the years, waiting for the right moment to rise. The director gave them a signal. The room fell silent, and for a second, Sandra forgot about the cameras. She forgot about the lights. All she could see was Keanu standing in front of her with an expression she had never seen so clearly before. The scene began. Sandra spoke her lines softly, her voice carrying real emotion. Keanu responded with equal sincerity, and the camera moved slowly around them. But halfway through the scene, something unexpected happened. Keanu stopped following the script. He took a slow breath, stepped a little closer, and spoke in his real voice, not the character's. He said her name. Not the character's name. Her name. Sandra felt her breath catch. She knew instantly that this was not part of the film. The director did not shout cut. No one moved. The camera kept rolling because everyone sensed something real was unfolding. Keanu's voice was steady but emotional. He told her that the small memory he remembered today was not the only one he carried. He said he had remembered hundreds of small moments about her over the years. Quiet things, gentle things, things she never knew he noticed, like the way she touched her hair when she was nervous, the way she laughed softly when she felt relieved, the way she looked at the ground when something hurt her but she tried to hide it. Sandra stared at him, stunned. Her heartbeat echoed loudly in her ears. Keanu continued. He said he had kept those memories not because they were important to the world, but because they mattered deeply to him. He said that every small detail she shared, even the ones she forgot, stayed with him because she mattered more to him than she realized. Sandra felt her chest tighten with emotion. Her eyes began to fill with tears she could not stop. She whispered his name softly, her voice shaking. She asked him why he never told her this before. He looked at her with a gentle sadness. He explained that he always wanted her to feel free, never pressured. He never wanted to risk their friendship or make her uncomfortable. He believed timing mattered. But when he saw her struggling today, when he remembered the small object she once valued so much, something inside him told him that hiding his feelings was no longer kindness. It was fear, and he did not want fear to guide him anymore. The room was silent. The entire crew stood frozen, witnessing a moment that did not belong to the film. Sandra's tears fell gently, but this time they were not born from fear or pressure. They were born from something warm, something overwhelming, something true. She stepped closer to Keanu, lowering her voice so only he could hear. She told him that she had always felt safe with him, always. She said she trusted him more than anyone else. She confessed that she had felt something growing inside her for a long time too, but she never dared to name it because she thought he deserved someone stronger. Someone who never broke down, someone who never struggled with old fears. Keanu shook his head gently and told her that strength was not about never struggling. It was about showing up with a full heart, even when life felt heavy. He said she was stronger than she ever gave herself credit for, and he looked at her with such deep respect that Sandra felt all the walls inside her melt away. The director finally whispered cut in the softest voice, as if afraid to disturb the moment. But even after the camera stopped, Sandra and Keanu did not step away from each other. They stayed close, breathing in the same quiet air, holding a truth that had finally come to the surface after years of silence. The crew quietly stepped back to give them space. No one spoke. No one dared to break the moment. Sandra reached into her jacket and pulled out the small object he had given her earlier. She held it between them and whispered that this was not just a memory now, it was a beginning. Keanu smiled softly, and in that moment Sandra felt something inside her light up in a way she had never felt before. Everything heavy from the morning fell away. The nervousness, the tension, the confusion, all replaced by something warm and steady. Keanu remembered something small. But that small memory opened a truth she had never expected. As they walked off the set together for lunch, the crew watched them with quiet smiles, knowing they had witnessed something rare and beautiful. Sandra held the small object close to her chest, and for the first time in a long time, her smile was not borrowed. It was real, deep, full of something she could finally name. Hope. And Keanu walked beside her, carrying a weight that no longer needed to be hidden, a truth that had finally found its place. The day that began with quiet fear ended with something far more powerful. Kindness, connection, and the small memory that changed everything.